You're breaking yourself, and you don't even realize it. As you watch this video, you're probably doing one of the 7 things that quietly drain your emotional strength, things you don't even see as self-destructive. And the worst part? You've done it so many times, it became automatic. There's a reason why you feel exhausted even when your body hasn't done anything heavy. There's a reason why you fall asleep tired from your own mind. Do you know what the Stoics discovered more than 2,000 years ago? That there's a difference between being tired and being broken inside, between carrying the weight of the world and carrying yourself. Today, I'm not here to motivate you. I won't tell you you're strong. I'm going to show you what's eating away at you when no one is watching. Because there's a moment, right at the end of the day, when you turn off your phone, shut the lights, and sit alone with your own thoughts, in that silence, something whispers. It's not the things that happen to you that wear you down. It's the things you do to yourself, again and again, without noticing. Like a leaky faucet you've learned to ignore, until the wall collapses. You may not see it, but there are habits you don't even recognize as habits, draining your emotional strength drop by drop. Like a quiet leak. In the basement of your soul, the Stoics knew something we forgot. It's not others who destroy us, it's ourselves, and we do it in silence, with terrifying precision. Marcus Aurelius wrote in his Meditations, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength." But what he didn't say is that sometimes we are the outside event we need to control. If you have the courage to face yourself in the mirror, without filters, without excuses, then stay with me, because what I'm about to show you may disturb you, but it will also set you free. There are 7 silent habits, 7 subtle ways you sabotage your own emotional strength, 7 ways you become your own executioner, without even noticing. And the most terrifying part, you'll probably recognize yourself in every single one. So, take a deep breath. Because we're about to step into a place few dare to enter, the place of naked truth about who you really are, when no one is watching. And remember, it's not about being perfect. It's about being aware. Because awareness is the first step toward freedom. The first silent habit that destroys your emotional strength is something you do every single day, multiple times, without realizing it. And the more you do it, the weaker you become. You over-explain your decisions. Think about the last time someone questioned your choices. What did you do? You probably spent 10 minutes explaining yourself, defending your reasons, as if you were on trial. But here's what happens when you constantly justify your decisions. You give your power to people who never asked for it. You place your self-worth in the hands of those who may not even care. Marcus Aurelius never wasted time explaining why he woke before sunrise to write his Meditations. He just woke up. Seneca didn't explain his practices to critics. He just lived by his principles. A Stoic understands a simple truth. Those who explain too much shrink themselves, not because explaining is wrong, but because compulsive explaining is a sign you don't trust your own choices. When you feel the need to constantly justify yourself, you're silently telling the world, "Please validate me, please tell me I'm right." And the world rarely does. Starting today, when someone questions your choices, try something different. Just smile and move on. Watch how it changes the whole energy of the moment. Watch how it protects your emotional energy. The second silent habit is even more subtle, but just as destructive. You carry conversations that have already ended. That argument from 3 days ago, still echoing in your mind. You replay what you should have said. You imagine better comebacks. You build entire dialogues that will never happen. Meanwhile, real life goes on without you. Epictetus, who was once a slave before he became a philosopher, would say, "You're enslaved by ghosts, a prisoner of conversations that exist only in your head." And what's the problem with carrying dead conversations? They take up mental space meant for living ones, for real relationships, for the present moment. You're at work, but your mind is still stuck in a fight with your brother. You're with your kids, but your head is stuck in a tense meeting. You're physically present, but emotionally absent. And the most ironic part, these mental reruns never solve anything, never bring peace, never change what already happened. They just drain your emotional strength, like an open drain. The Stoics practice something called continuous presence. The skill of being fully where you are, not because the past doesn't matter, but because emotionally reliving it is a refined form of self-betrayal. Next time you catch yourself stuck in the past, ask yourself one question: is this happening now? If the answer is no, breathe deep and come back. Back to where you really are. Back to who's really with you. Back to what's really happening. The third silent habit might be the most common in the digital age. You seek approval in empty places, likes, comments, stares of approval, constant external validation. You build your self-worth on shaky ground, and shaky ground can't hold anything for long. Seneca wrote letters to himself, not for applause. Marcus Aurelius wrote his meditations, never thinking anyone would read them. They developed inner emotional strength because they didn't depend on external validation. The problem isn't wanting to be accepted. That's human. The problem is when your inner peace depends on the opinion of people who barely know you, when your mood shifts with the numbers on a screen. When you chase external approval compulsively, you're sending a message to your own mind: I'm not enough by myself. I need others to tell me I have worth. And your mind, which is extremely obedient, starts to believe it. It starts to look for proof that you're really not enough. It gets addicted to other people's opinions, like a drug. Before you post something today, before you seek approval today, ask yourself an honest question: am I doing this for me or for them? If the answer is for them, pause, breathe, and ask yourself if it's really worth giving your emotional power away that easily. There's a subtle but deep difference between sharing something because you believe it can help and sharing something because you need someone to validate you. One comes from abundance, the other comes from lack. The Stoic builds what we can call inner validation. He knows when he's done something well, regardless of recognition. He knows when his intentions are pure, regardless of how others interpret his actions. That doesn't mean being indifferent to people. It means not being dependent on them to know who you are. It means building your identity on solid ground, not on quicksand. Think about this. How many times have you changed your opinion about yourself just because of a comment? How many times have you felt good or bad based on likes or the lack of them? How many times have you interpreted silence as rejection? This emotional dependence on external validation is like living with your self-esteem on a roller coaster. One day you're on top because someone praised your work. The next day you're down because no one replied to your message. The Stoic chooses to get off that roller coaster, not because he doesn't care, but because he knows his inner peace can't depend on other people's moods, that his emotional strength can't be tied to things outside his control. And when you stop chasing approval compulsively, something interesting happens. People start to respect you more, because you project an energy of wholeness, not of neediness. You become someone who adds value to interactions, not someone who tries to extract validation from them. And most importantly, you finally find peace, because true peace only comes from within. It only comes when you stop outsourcing your self-worth to people who have their own issues to deal with. The fourth silent habit may be the most twisted one of our modern era, and you probably do it every day, many times, without realizing the damage it causes to your soul. You compare yourself to edited lives. You take your real day, with its imperfections, frustrations, and ordinary moments, and compare it to someone else's highlight reel. It's like comparing a movie to real life. like comparing a 2-minute trailer to an entire film. But your brain doesn't get that. To your brain, that perfect Instagram photo is their real life. That LinkedIn post about success is their daily norm. That smiling family on Facebook is how they live, 24/7. The result? You feel like your life is small, insignificant, like you're behind, like everyone discovered the secret to happiness, and somehow you miss the memo. The Stoics understood something we've forgotten. Comparison is the killer of gratitude. It's impossible to feel content with your life when you constantly measure it against someone else's. Marcus Aurelius was the most powerful man in the known world during his time, Emperor of Rome. And yet, he wrote about the importance of focusing on his own journey, his own challenges, his own growth. If even the Emperor of Rome knew that comparing himself to others was a trap, imagine for us, ordinary people living ordinary lives. The problem isn't admiring others. The problem is using their lives as a measuring stick for your own unworthiness, using their success as evidence of your failure. When you compare yourself compulsively, you're stealing energy that could be used to improve your own life. You're wasting time that could be spent enjoying your own moments. And here's the paradox: the people you admire are probably spending time comparing themselves to others too. Everyone is looking up the ladder, thinking they're falling behind. Next time you catch yourself comparing, remember this: you're comparing your backstage to someone else's stage. You know all your fears, insecurities, and failures. You don't know theirs. The fifth silent habit is even more subtle and maybe more destructive than the others. You run from emotional discomfort. Netflix when you're anxious, food when you're sad, shopping when you're bored, overworking when you're scared, endless scrolling when you're restless. Anything to not feel. Any distraction to avoid facing what's happening inside you. But here's the truth nobody wants to hear. What you avoid persists. The emotion you refuse to face doesn't disappear. It hides, gains strength, and comes back later, with interest. The Stoics had a completely different relationship with emotional discomfort. They didn't run from it. They approached it. Not because they liked to suffer, but because they understood that on the other side of pain is growth. Epictetus taught that it's not events that disturb us, but our interpretation of them. But to change our interpretation, we must first be willing to fully feel the disturbance. When you systematically run from emotional discomfort, you lose a fundamental ability, the ability to process your own experiences. You become emotionally constipated, you store unresolved tensions, and worse, you begin to lose trust in your own capacity to deal with hardship. Your emotional comfort zone shrinks. Even the slightest challenge starts to feel unbearable. Anxiety wants to teach you something about your fears. Sadness wants to teach you something about your losses. Anger wants to teach you something about your boundaries. But you'll only learn those lessons if you stop to listen. The next time you feel anxiety, sadness, or any uncomfortable emotion, try something different. Don't run. Sit with it. Breathe through it. Ask her, what are you trying to teach me? You may discover that your emotions aren't enemies, they are messengers, and messengers deserve to be heard, not silenced. The difference between someone emotionally strong and someone emotionally fragile doesn't lie in the absence of difficult emotions. It lies in the ability to stay present with them without immediately needing to run away. Think about it. When you were a child and fell off your bike, you didn't avoid bikes for the rest of your life. You learned how to fall better. You learned how to balance. You developed skill through experience. The same applies to emotions. When you avoid feeling sadness, you don't develop emotional resilience. When you avoid anxiety, you don't develop courage. When you avoid anger, you don't learn where your limits are. The Stoics practice something called amor fati, love of fate. That meant not just loving the good moments, but the hard ones too, because they understood both were essential for growth. I'm not saying you should chase suffering. I'm saying stop running from the suffering that's already there. Stop adding suffering on top of suffering by constantly resisting it. There's an old wisdom that says pain is inevitable. Suffering is optional. Pain is what happens. Suffering is our resistance to what happens. Our refusal to accept the emotional reality of the moment. When you stop running from your emotions, something changes. They start to flow through you instead of getting stuck inside you. They become temporary visitors, not permanent residents. And you develop something rare in today's world, real emotional stability. Not the artificial stability that comes from avoiding discomfort, but the genuine kind that comes from knowing you can handle whatever life throws at you. You become like a strong tree, not because you never face storms, but because your roots grew deep enough to keep you standing when the wind comes. The next time you feel the urge to escape into a distraction, when something uncomfortable arises, pause for a moment, breathe, and consider staying. Consider being curious about what you're feeling, instead of being afraid of it. You might discover you're stronger than you think, that you can endure more than you believed, and that on the other side of discomfort is a version of you haven't met yet. The sixth silent habit may be the most draining of all, and you probably do it from the moment you wake up until the moment you go to sleep, wasting emotional energy on battles you can never win. You try to control the uncontrollable. Traffic, other people's moods, the weather, the future, the past, the economy, politics, the choices of others. You spend mental and emotional energy trying to move mountains with your bare hands, and then wonder why you feel exhausted even when your body didn't do much. The Stoics discovered a liberating truth more than 2,000 years ago. There is only one thing in this world you can fully control: your actions, your thoughts, your choices in the present moment. Everything else is out of your control. And when you waste energy trying to control what's not yours to control, you automatically lose the energy to control what actually is. Think about it. How many times have you gotten angry in traffic, as if your anger could move the cars in front of you? How many times have you felt anxious about something in the future, as if your anxiety could influence events that haven't even happened? How many times have you tried to change someone's mind, someone clearly unwilling to change? How many times have you lost sleep over things entirely outside your influence? Epictetus, who spent years as a slave before becoming one of history's most influential philosophers, taught this: some things are within our control, and some are not. Within our control are our opinions, aspirations, desires, and aversions. Outside our control are our body, property, reputation, position, and so on. True freedom begins when you stop trying to control the uncontrollable and focus completely on what is within your reach. When you're stuck in traffic, instead of getting irritated by something unchangeable, you can choose how to respond. You can choose to listen to music, reflect, plan your day, or simply breathe. When someone behaves in a way you dislike, instead of trying to change them, you can choose how to interpret the situation, how to respond, and how much emotional energy you'll invest in it. Before getting upset over something today, ask a simple question: is this under my control? If the answer is no, practice what the Stoics called letting go. Not because you don't care, but because you choose to invest your energy where it can actually make a difference. The seventh and final silent habit may be the most fundamental of all. You live on emotional autopilot. Someone criticizes you, and you instantly get defensive. Someone doesn't reply to your message, and you assume the worst. Something doesn't go as planned, and frustration takes over. You don't choose your reactions, they just happen, like reflexes, like automatic programming. Your emotional life is run by conditioned responses, not conscious choices. And when you don't choose your emotions, they choose you. the Stoics understood something powerful. Between stimulus and response, there's a space, a moment of pause, and in that space lies your freedom, the power to choose how you respond. But most people never learn to inhabit that space. They react instantly, automatically, without even realizing there was a choice. Viktor Frankl, a Holocaust survivor, wrote, "Between stimulus and response, there is a space. In that space is our power to choose our response. In our response lies our growth and our freedom." Imagine if you could pause for just 2 seconds before reacting to anything. Imagine if you could choose consciously how to respond instead of reacting on impulse. That's the difference between being controlled by your emotions and having mastery over them. It doesn't mean suppressing how you feel. It means being able to feel fully and still choose how to respond. When someone irritates you today, try creating a 2-second space between the trigger and your reply. Breathe once, then choose consciously. How do you want to respond? When you feel anxiety, anger, or frustration, pause. Acknowledge what you're feeling, then ask, how do I want to respond to this? What kind of person do I want to be right now? This simple practice can completely transform your emotional experience, because when you stop being a victim of your emotional reflexes, you become the author of your experience. The difference between emotional maturity and emotional reactivity is not the absence of intense emotions. It's the ability to create a conscious space between feeling and acting. Think about how many times you've regretted something you said in the heat of the moment. How many times you've sent an angry message you later wished you hadn't. How many times you overreacted to something small, all because you were operating on emotional autopilot. Your nervous system took the wheel, and you became a passenger in your own reactions. The Stoics practiced specific exercises to develop this capacity for conscious pause. Marcus Aurelius wrote to himself every morning, training his mind to respond consciously to the challenges of the day. Seneca reviewed his actions each night, reflecting on how he reacted and identifying moments where he could have responded better. They understood something crucial. Emotional mastery isn't a one-time achievement. It's a daily practice, a muscle you have to train. When you live on emotional autopilot, you're outsourcing your reactions to patterns from your past. You're not responding to the present. You're reacting from old wounds, old fears, old conditioning, which means you're not really living in the present. You're being controlled by your past. Your reactions today are echoes of experiences that may no longer matter. True emotional freedom begins when you develop the ability to respond to what's actually happening, not what your programming tells you to feel. And here's something interesting. When you develop this ability to pause, people start to notice. You radiate a different energy, a presence that communicates inner control, without coldness. You become someone people trust because they know you won't explode. You won't react impulsively. You become a point of stability in a world addicted to overreaction. But more important than how others see you is how you begin to feel inside. When you stop being a hostage to your emotional impulses, you finally feel free. Free to choose who you want to be in every moment. And that freedom, that power of conscious choice, might be the greatest gift you could ever give yourself. Because in the end, you don't control what happens to you, but you always get to choose who you become because of it. Now let's return to that silent moment from the beginning. That weight you carry when no one is watching. Now you know where it comes from. It's not that the world is heavy, it's the silent habits you develop to survive in it. Over-explaining your choices, carrying dead conversations, seeking approval in empty places, comparing your life to edited lives, avoiding emotional discomfort, trying to control the uncontrollable, living on autopilot. 7 subtle ways you drain your own emotional strength. 7 silent forms of self-sabotage. But here's the liberating truth the Stoics discovered. It's not the world's job to stop raining. It's your job to fix the roof. The Stoics weren't emotionless people. They were people who chose their emotions. They built their strength in silence. They understood one simple truth. You don't control what happens to you, but you do control who you become through it. Marcus Aurelius ruled an empire in crisis, faced wars, plagues, betrayal. Yet his meditations are not about the external problems he faced. They're about how he chose to respond internally. Epictetus was enslaved for years, abused, stripped of all external freedom, but his teachings were about inner freedom, about how no one can enslave your mind unless you give them permission. Seneca was one of the wealthiest men in Rome, and yet he faced political exile and lived under the constant threat of death. His letters weren't about avoiding suffering, they were about finding meaning through it. They didn't have perfect lives, they had perfect tools to deal with imperfect ones. And those tools begin with a radical insight. Most of your suffering doesn't come from what happens to you. It comes from what you do with what happens to you. It comes from the mental and emotional habits you've developed to process reality. When you stop compulsively explaining your choices, you conserve emotional energy and project natural confidence. When you stop carrying dead conversations, you become fully present for living ones. When you stop chasing external validation, you build unshakable self-worth from within. When you stop comparing yourself to edited lives, you can finally appreciate your own journey. When you stop running from discomfort, you develop real resilience. When you stop trying to control the uncontrollable, you redirect your energy to where it can actually make a difference. And when you stop living on emotional autopilot, you finally become free to choose who you want to be. It's not about becoming perfect, it's about becoming conscious, because consciousness is the first step to any real change. And here's something few understand. Real change doesn't happen through brute force or temporary motivation. It happens through small, consistent adjustments in how you process reality. Each time you choose not to over-explain yourself, you strengthen an emotional muscle. Each time you choose not to replay a dead conversation, you practice presence. Each time you create a space between stimulus and response, you practice freedom. The Stoics knew emotional strength isn't something you earn once. It's something you cultivate daily through small, conscious choices. And perhaps the most beautiful part is this. When you stop draining your own emotional strength through these silent habits, you automatically have more energy to be who you truly want to be. More patience for the people you love, more energy for your projects, more clarity for your decisions, more peace just to exist. Maybe the world stays loud. Maybe people still act like people, but now you have an anchor, and anchors don't ask for permission to remain still. You don't have to change the world, you just have to stop sabotaging yourself in silence. And when you do that, something happens. You become an island of calm in an ocean of chaos, not because nothing affects you, but because you chose how to be affected. Now, we arrive at the most important moment. Not the moment when you intellectually understand what was said, but the moment when you decide what you're going to do with that understanding. Because knowledge without action is just intellectual entertainment. And you didn't watch this far to be entertained. You watched because something inside you knows it's time to change. If anything here made sense to you, if you recognized even one of these silent habits in yourself, then leave just one word in the comments. One word that represents what you're choosing to do differently starting today. Not a paragraph, not your life story. Just one word, a word that captures your intent to change. Maybe it's presence, if you're letting go of dead conversations. Maybe it's strength, if you're done chasing external validation. Maybe it's choice, if you're stepping off emotional autopilot. One word, that's it. Because words hold power when chosen consciously. And when you write that word, You're not just commenting on a video, you're making a silent commitment to yourself. The Stoics believed in the power of declared intention, not for others, but for yourself, because when you name an intention, even in one word, you activate something in your mind that starts to look for opportunities to live that intention. Your word becomes a reminder, a code, a signal to yourself that you've chosen a new path. And if you know someone who's carrying too much, maybe it's time to share this. Not because I asked, but because some truths are too heavy to carry alone. You probably know someone who over-explains their choices, someone living on emotional autopilot, someone trying to control the uncontrollable and burning out in the process. Sharing this isn't about likes. It's not about looking wise. It's about reaching a hand to someone who may be drowning silently in the same habits you saw in yourself. Because here's the truth about emotional strength. It multiplies when shared. When you stop silently sabotaging yourself, you automatically become an example that it's possible to live differently. Your inner peace becomes contagious. Your emotional steadiness inspires others to find their own. Your conscious control over your reactions shows others they too can choose their responses. You become living proof that emotional freedom is possible in a world designed to trap us in automatic patterns. But remember, real change happens in silence, far from the spotlight. In the small choices you make when no one is watching, when you choose not to over-explain yourself to someone questioning your decision, when you choose not to replay that difficult conversation from last week, when you choose to stay present with an uncomfortable emotion instead of escaping into a distraction. These are the victories that truly matter, the silent victories no one sees, but that transform who you are on the inside. And when you accumulate enough of these quiet inner wins, something extraordinary happens. You become a different person, not because you changed your personality, but because you changed your patterns. You become someone who responds instead of reacting, someone who chooses instead of being chosen, someone who lives consciously instead of automatically. The Stoics had a concept called premeditatio malorum, the premeditation of evils. They imagined the worst-case scenarios, not to become pessimistic, but to prepare themselves emotionally for anything life might bring. They knew real emotional strength doesn't come from avoiding hardship. It comes from being ready to face it with dignity and conscious choice. So as you leave this video and return to your life, take this with you. You now have a map. You know where the leaks are in your emotional roof. The rain will keep falling. People will keep being people. The world will remain unpredictable. But now you have the tools to remain steady in the storm, not because nothing affects you, but because you chose how to be affected. And that choice, that freedom to respond consciously, is perhaps the greatest power a human being can have, because in the end, you can lose everything you possess, but no one can ever take away your ability to choose your own response.